Nearly 50 years ago, TV audiences first got to meet the Waltons, a close-knit family living on a mountainside in Virginia. The show was must-see TV in the 1970s.
What made so many members of one of television's most beloved families walk away from the mountain that made them famous? For 9 seasons, the Waltons turned a modest Virginia family into a national comfort ritual. Yet behind the warm porch light sat contract disputes, a real stroke, a real death, and a budget spreadsheet that quietly ended a beloved father's run. Some actors left because Hollywood no longer had room for the roles they wanted. Others simply had enough of playing the same part. From John Boy's 5-year plan to Grandma's real hospital stay, here are 10 true stories behind the departures that reshaped the show forever. The 5-year deal that sent John Boy away. Richard Thomas turned John Boy Walton into one of the most recognizable teenagers on American television, earning an Emmy for the role in only its first season. What most fans never realized was that Thomas had privately set an expiration date on his own career at Walton's Mountain long before cameras ever rolled. Speaking years later to the Montreal Star, Thomas explained that he decided the moment he signed his original contract that he would stay with the series for no more than 5 seasons, reasoning that any longer would tie him too tightly to a single character and limit the other work he wanted to pursue. That plan held firm even as the show reached its commercial peak. When Season 5 wrapped in 1977, Thomas walked away, and series creator Earl Hamner later admitted he was devastated to lose him, though he believed leaving was the right move for an actor at risk of being permanently defined by one role. Castmate Eric Scott, who played Ben Walton, has since described feeling blindsided by the exit, admitting decades later that he assumed Thomas was simply negotiating a bigger contract and would eventually re-sign. Rather than kill off John Boy entirely, producers chose to recast the role the following season, a decision that would ripple through the rest of the series and change how the Walton family functioned on screen for good. Thomas, for his part, never regretted the timing, going on to build a decades-long career across theater, film, and prestige television long after Walton's Mountain faded into reruns. Just as one Walton son was plotting his exit around a contract clause, the woman playing his television mother was quietly running out of patience with her own storyline. Why Olivia Walton packed her bags after Season 8. Michael Learned won 3 Emmy Awards for her work as Olivia Walton, yet by the late 1970s she had grown restless with a character she felt had stopped evolving. Speaking candidly on the Still Here Hollywood podcast decades after the show ended, Learned recalled that producers frequently kept her physically present in scenes without giving her much to actually do, often having Olivia iron clothes or ask her children simple questions just to justify her presence in the shot. Learned bluntly described the later seasons of playing Olivia as boring, admitting that as an actor, she felt underused even while still deeply attached to her castmates and the crew she considered a second family. That frustration, paired with a desire to take on more challenging material elsewhere, led her to exit the series following its 8th season, with the show writing Olivia's absence into a tuberculosis storyline that sent the character to a sanatorium. Learned's departure coincided with an even bigger shakeup behind the scenes, since Richard Thomas had already left 2 seasons earlier and a new actor had stepped into John Boy's shoes. Losing both central parental figures within a short stretch forced the writers to lean more heavily on the Walton children, permanently shifting the show's center of gravity. Learned has said many times since that she never regretted the decision, even while acknowledging how emotional it was to say goodbye to a role that had defined nearly a decade of her career. While Olivia's exit was framed as a personal choice, the man who played her on-screen husband would soon discover that his own departure had far less to do with feelings and everything to do with money. A budget cut written into the final season. Ralph Waite appeared in every single episode of The Waltons for 8 consecutive seasons as patriarch John Walton Sr., anchoring the family through the Depression and the early years of World War II without missing a beat. That streak ended abruptly in the 9th and final season, when Waite appeared in only 8 of the 22 episodes, a sudden and unexplained absence that puzzled longtime viewers who had never known the show without him. Industry records later indicated that Waite's reduced presence in the final season stemmed largely from budgetary pressure on a series whose ratings had begun to slip after nearly a decade on the air, combined with the practical reality that a veteran lead actor's salary carries more weight on a shrinking production budget. Reporting on the decision noted that Waite was offered a contract for only 8 episodes and was not brought back for the remaining 14 installments of the season, a stark contrast to the unbroken presence he had maintained since the pilot film in 1971. Waite's limited final season meant the Walton children largely carried the show's last chapter on their own, a fitting bookend, given how much the family had grown up in front of the cameras by that point. He would return for every one of the reunion movies that followed throughout the 1980s and 1990s, remaining close with his television family until his death in 2014, proof that the budget-related absence never reflected any real falling out with the production. Money problems were not the only off-screen crisis quietly reshaping the Walton household during those same years, since one of the show's most beloved grandparents was fighting a very real health battle of her own. The stroke that changed Grandma Esther forever. Ellen Corby had already built a long career as a respected character actress before she ever stepped onto Walton's Mountain, and her portrayal of sharp-tongued, warm-hearted Grandma Esther Walton earned her 3 Emmy Awards during the show's run. Her presence on screen changed permanently in 1976, however, when Corby suffered a real-life stroke that left her with lasting physical effects, a medical emergency the production could not simply write around. Rather than replace her, the show's writers made the unusual choice to fold Corby's actual recovery into the storyline itself, having Grandma Esther suffer a stroke on screen that mirrored what the actress was experiencing off-camera. Coverage of Corby's career noted that she continued appearing on the series only intermittently after the stroke, a reduced but meaningful presence that lasted until the show's final seasons, giving audiences a rare and unusually honest window into an actor's real medical struggle playing out in real time on a primetime family drama. Corby's determination to keep working despite her health became one of the quieter, more remarkable stories of the entire series, and castmates frequently praised her resilience in later interviews. She continued making occasional appearances well beyond the Waltons itself before passing away in 1999 at the age of 87, remembered as one of television's defining grandmothers. Corby's stroke was a private tragedy turned into public storytelling, but the very next loss the Walton family suffered left no room for a storyline workaround at all. Grandpa Walton's death became part of the story. Will Geer brought decades of stage and screen experience to the role of Grandpa Zebulon Walton, including a career that had survived being blacklisted during the McCarthy era, making his late career success on the Waltons feel like a genuine personal triumph. His gruff, tender performance as the family's elder statesman made him one of the show's most beloved figures almost from the moment the series began. Geer's time on the show ended not by choice, but by his death in 1978, partway through the 6th season, after a battle with respiratory illness. Rather than quietly erasing the character, the production chose to write Grandpa's death directly into the show, giving the Walton family and the audience watching at home a chance to grieve alongside the fictional relatives who had come to feel like an extension of their own. The episode devoted to mourning him remains one of the most emotionally direct hours the series ever produced, treating a real loss with the same seriousness the show usually reserved for its most dramatic storylines. Gere's death arrived during an already turbulent stretch for the Walton family, both on screen and off, coming not long before Ellen Corby's health struggles and well before Michael learned and Ralph Waite would eventually step back themselves. Losing the family's patriarchal grandfather figure so early in the show's run permanently altered its tone, pushing the series toward more mature material as the remaining Walton children grew into adults. Cast members have described Gere as a mentor figure on set, someone whose decades of stage experience and storytelling shaped how younger actors approached the craft long after his final scenes aired. With Grandpa gone and John Boy already recast once, the show faced its most unusual casting decision yet, when it came time to fill the empty chair at the head of the family's storytelling tradition. The new face nobody expected as John Boy. When Richard Thomas departed after season 5, producers made the unusual choice not to write John Boy out of the story, but to recast the role entirely, bringing in actor Robert Whiteman to continue the character's journey starting in season 8. Whiteman stepped into a role so closely associated with one actor that the transition became one of the most talked about casting changes in the show's history, with the character reintroduced through a storyline explaining his absence as recovery from a wartime plane crash. Whiteman continued playing John Boy through the remainder of the series and into the 1982 reunion film A Day for Thanks on Walton's Mountain, before his career gradually shifted away from series television and toward stage acting, including celebrated theatrical performances in productions such as Vieux Carre and King Lear that drew praise from Los Angeles critics. Rather than chasing another long-running television role, Whiteman built a career centered on live theater, a markedly different path from the one Thomas had taken after his own exit. Not every cast member welcomed the change quietly. Michael Learned has said that acting opposite a new John Boy never felt entirely natural to her, admitting that once the character returned with an unfamiliar face and voice, something about the show's original chemistry never fully returned for her, even as she continued performing her role through the transition. While Whiteman was busy finding his footing in a role he had inherited rather than created, the youngest members of the Walton family were beginning to plan their own futures far away from Walton's Mountain entirely. Trading Walton's Mountain for a college campus. Cami Cotler played the youngest Walton child, Elizabeth, for the entire 9-season run of the series, growing up in front of the cameras from the age of 6 to 16. Unlike several of her castmates, Cotler's departure from acting had nothing to do with conflict, illness, or budget cuts. It came down to a simple, deliberate choice about what she wanted her adult life to look like once filming ended in 1981. Cotler has explained in multiple interviews that she auditioned for a handful of roles after the series wrapped, but found the process far less rewarding than the steady work she had known on set for nearly a decade. She has said that as she began auditioning for new projects, she realized the competitive nature of casting calls held little appeal compared to the community she had experienced on the Waltons, which pushed her toward enrolling at the University of California, Berkeley instead, where she earned a degree in social sciences. That decision led Cotler toward a long career in education rather than entertainment, eventually working as a classroom teacher and later as a principal, helping to launch a charter school. She remains close with her former castmates and attends Walton's fan events regularly, but acting itself became a closed chapter almost immediately once she left Walton's Mountain behind for a lecture hall. Cotler was far from the only Walton sibling who chose a completely different career path once the cameras finally stopped rolling for good. The Walton son who chose a delivery truck over Hollywood. Eric Scott played Ben Walton for the show's entire run, developing a reputation among castmates as one of the most dependable and grounded members of the ensemble. Unlike Richard Thomas or Michael Learned, Scott never left the series early, staying through all 9 seasons and even weighing in publicly in later years about how it felt to watch his on-screen brother walk away from the show back in 1977. Once the Waltons ended in 1981, however, Scott made a decision that surprised many fans who expected him to continue chasing acting work the way several of his castmates did. Rather than pursuing the next role, Scott chose to step away from show business altogether and took a job with a delivery company, eventually working his way up to running the operation himself, trading sound stages for a completely different kind of daily grind. That decision reflected a broader pattern among several younger Walton actors, many of whom had spent their entire adolescence on set and felt ready for an ordinary life once the show wrapped for good. Scott has remained a familiar face at Walton's reunions and fan conventions over the years, openly reflecting on both his time on the series and his very different second career, without ever expressing regret over the direction he chose. Scott's shift away from Hollywood mirrored the choice made by another Walton brother, one who traded his on-screen dream of becoming a pilot for a very different kind of practical education. Jim Bob's quiet exit into the business world. David W. Harper portrayed Jim Bob Walton for all 9 seasons of the series, playing a character whose storylines often centered on mechanical tinkering and a dream of someday becoming a pilot. Harper stayed with the show through its entire run, never departing early the way some of his castmates did, and remained a steady presence in the Walton household right up until the series finale in 1981. After the show ended, Harper took a handful of small-screen roles, including an appearance in the CBS miniseries The Blue and the Gray, and a minor part in the 1985 comedy Fletch, before ultimately deciding that a long-term acting career was not the path he wanted to pursue. He instead chose to return to school and study business, moving into a private, largely public life outside the entertainment industry that has continued for decades since, a striking contrast to the constant public exposure he experienced as a child actor. Harper's transition away from acting has been among the quieter cast departures associated with the series, largely because it happened gradually and outside the spotlight, rather than through any single dramatic announcement. He still appears at Walton's cast reunions from time to time, maintaining friendships with his former television siblings, even though his professional life moved in an entirely different direction decades ago, and fellow cast members have described him as one of the most private members of the original ensemble. While Harper quietly built a business career, another Walton sibling was chasing an entirely different calling, one rooted in the music he had always loved more than acting itself. The middle son who traded scripts for sheet music. John Walmsley played Jason Walton, the family's musically gifted middle son, for the show's complete 9-season run, a role that closely mirrored his own real-life talents as a multi-instrumentalist. Long before he ever stepped in front of a camera, Walmsley had already learned to play piano, guitar, banjo, and several other instruments, skills the show's writers leaned into by giving Jason his own musical storylines throughout the series. After the Waltons ended, Walmsley continued acting sporadically, appearing in nearly every reunion movie produced throughout the 1980s and 1990s. But his professional focus gradually shifted away from scripts and toward the recording studio. He has said that pursuing music allowed him to be recognized for his own individual style rather than being permanently defined by a single television character, a distinction that mattered greatly to him after growing up known almost exclusively as Jason Walton. And he went on to work as a touring guitarist and producer, alongside a long list of respected musicians. Walmsley eventually settled in Cornwall, England, choosing a quieter, more private existence built around performing and recording rather than chasing further screen roles. He still takes part in occasional Waltons reunions and fan gatherings, maintaining the same close bond with his television family that has defined the cast's relationship for more than 5 decades, even as his true career found its home far away from Walton's Mountain and Hollywood altogether. From a 5-year contract clause to a real-life stroke, a budget cut, and a series of deliberate career changes, the reasons these 10 Walton family members eventually left the show revealed just how much real life was always quietly running alongside the fictional one, shaping a series that audiences still return to more than 5 decades after it first aired. Their choices, whether forced by health, money, or simple restlessness, are part of why Walton's Mountain still feels so real today. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.